Being a monster hunter was not something I was born into. My father told me to go out and get a trade. He wanted me to apprentice under the finest professional in my field. He didn't want me to live a poor life growing crop to have it stolen by brigands or richer men. But I don't think this is what he had in mind.
Monster hunters, as their title suggests, spend their lives hunting and killing all manner of aberrant creatures. This new Grim Hollow class 4-5e allows you to take on the role of a professional monster slayer, traveling the realm, killing creatures for coin. There's a link to the class in the description if you want to check it out for yourself. Maybe you're an altruistic conqueror of evil who chooses to help the defenseless defend themselves against the world's darkness. Or perhaps you're a scholar who actually admires monsters, preserving their endangered beauty while dealing with their more dangerous kind. Or maybe you hunt for a personal cause to get revenge for a tragedy that befell you or those you love when you were younger. My name is Ben Byrne, and in this video, I'm going to explore why you should want to play the new Monster Hunter class and break down how its early class features help you feel like an expert slayer of evil. But wait, I hear you ask, isn't there already a Monster Hunter class for 5e? And you would likely be referring to Matt Mercer's Blood Hunter. When I was first made aware of the Blood Hunter back in probably 2017, I was super excited and I went out and checked it out immediately. But my excitement quickly turned to disappointment when I got to play it in a campaign. I'm not saying that the Blood Hunter is bad or that you shouldn't want to play it. My personal issues with it boil down to sort of two key areas. I think it's pretty poorly balanced, and that the self-damage mechanics in particular harm its martial durability and effectiveness next to similar classes like the Ranger or the Paladin. The story of the Blood Hunter doesn't really reflect what I think is cool or interesting about being a monster hunter, or at least it leans too far into the arcane and the monster sent to slay monsters aspect to the detriment of the other motifs and cool things and themes around monster hunting. If you want me to do a full video going into detail about my issues with the Blood Hunter, let me know with a like on this video, or let me know in the comments below. But ever since I came to accept that the Blood Hunter just was not for me, I knew I had to design my own take on the monster hunting class. So what makes a monster hunter interesting? What makes a monster hunter interesting, to answer your question, Ben, is threefold. The idea of being a lone wolf and a misunderstood warrior often plays into it. It might be because you are a monster who kills monsters, or it might be because it's too dangerous for you to allow people to get close to you and have loved ones. The motivations of a monster hunter can be varied, whether it's virtuous and altruistic, a personal purpose, or a cold professional who expects to be paid. In any case, how and why of becoming a monster hunter will be central to your character. But the most important thing is being an expert in monsters and a professional through study, training, and personal experience, or a combination of all three. You know exactly how monsters think and behave. You know what they want and how they operate to get it. You know their strengths and you know their weaknesses. And most importantly, you have the skills and the tools to exploit those weaknesses to give yourself an advantage when fighting monsters. On his channel, Super Geek Mike has done a video called The Core Fantasy of Every D&D Class, where he describes the central idea of why you would want to play each of the respective classes. What I've just described above is the core fantasy of being a monster hunter. Someone who is a professional in hunting, trapping, talking to, and indeed killing monsters. You're not just a fighter who knows how to fight, a rogue who knows how to sneak and thieve, or a wizard who is an expert in all things arcane. All your knowledge and skills are specifically and expertly attuned to hunting monsters, and that's what makes you special. That's the core fantasy. So let's take a look at how we designed the Grim Hollow Monster Hunter to serve that core fantasy. This video might serve to give you some ideas about how you might want to build and play your Monster Hunter as we break down the early class features. Do note, this is currently playtest material. The version of the Monster Hunter that you're likely seeing right now is free on our blog, but it hasn't been stress tested in many games. I'd encourage you to give it a try and let us know what you think in the comments below. I will be there answering any questions you have and would love to hear how it goes in your game. All right, so if you're going to quick build your Monster Hunter, you want to choose either Dex or Strength as your primary ability score and Intelligence as your secondary one. Make no mistake, this is a martial class, and in fact, 2 of the subclasses make it completely devoid of any magic. We're not done with subclasses yet, so I'll hint that there is a more arcane subclass in the works. But the Monster Hunter is fashioned after the underdog that most often uses their wits and their courage to match their foe rather than their supernatural abilities. Think Sam and Dean Winchester, or Dr. Van Helsing, or even the Ghostbusters as inspiration for this Monster Hunter. Intelligence was super important as the secondary skill because the core fantasy of this class is being an authority in your knowledge about monsters. The hit points, proficiencies, and equipment are mostly geared towards a martial class, though note Monster Hunters don't have heavy armor as a proficiency automatically. A lot of skill proficiencies like religion and investigation are meant to fulfill the fantasy of being knowledgeable and an investigator who can put together clues about monsters. Arcana might seem like a strange exclusion here given the magical nature of some beasts, but the hunter isn't an expert in magic per se. You could also get Arcana from another source like your background if you wanted it. The saving throws are Strength and Dex. I can see this changing to include Intelligence in a future update, but I didn't want to favor ranged or melee hunters. This is also reflected in the fighting styles you get to choose from at first level, which includes archery, but also 2-weapon fighting or great weapon fighting depending on what sort of armaments you want to give your Monster Hunter. When I tried to fill my Monster Hunter void in the past by playing a Paladin, I was always frustrated by just how few options that class has at ranged combat. Unfortunately, there's no cool Van Helsing crossbow for you, Mr. Paladin. Your first level feature is the Monster Grimoire, and in many ways, the Monster Grimoire is the core of the Monster Hunter class. Barbarians rage, druids wild shape, monks use ki, and the Monster Hunter has their grimoire. Your grimoire is a collection of all your monster hunting knowledge compiled into one book, which you can reference when needed. It's assumed your Monster Hunter is journaling or taking notes in their grimoire during rests, reflecting upon and expanding what they've learned in the previous day. The idea for this actually came from Supernatural with John Winchester's journal, which Sam and Dean used to gain knowledge on the monsters that they're hunting. Van Helsing references medical journals while fighting Dracula, and exorcists often reference holy texts when hunting demons, so the idea of a Monster Grimoire is a bit of a motif for monster hunters. Its name also ties into the Grim Hollow Monster Grimoire, a codex of monsters which may look pretty similar to what your in-world grimoire looks like. What your Monster Grimoire does is allow you to choose 2 monster types to be an expert in hunting. So there's already some customization going into the class. Do you choose undead and shapeshifters as your monster types to hunt down vampires and werewolves in a gothic horror campaign? Or do you expertise in aberrations and fiends as a sort of Cthulhu mythos investigator? Or do you choose plants and fae as you range through the wildernesses of the world, hunting down dangerous tricksters? The grimoire makes you automatically proficient with any intelligence or wisdom checks made in relation to the monsters written about in your grimoire. If you already have proficiency in that skill normally, you have expertise instead and double your proficiency bonus. This includes survival checks for tracking your monster types, medicine for identifying wounds or damage types, history for recalling lore about monsters, nature to know if your monster can fly or swim, or investigation to notice clues that your specific monster types leave behind. I wanted a class feature that was more reliable than the advantage like what rangers get with favored enemy, and also more expansive across the mental proficiencies so that it feels like there are few gaps in your hunter's knowledge. As you level up, you also gain more monster types that get added to your grimoire as your knowledge base grows, and more class features provide advantages against those monster types as well as you become more proficient as a hunter. Your level 2 class feature as your monster hunter gains more experience is called Hunter's Instincts and has two main inspirations. First, it's sort of an answer to the Monster Slayer Ranger's Hunter's Sense, which is in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and that ability gives what I think is pretty limited information about the monster you're hunting, and is also an entire action to use, whereas Hunter's Instincts only uses a bonus action. For reasons I hope are reasonably evident by now as well, I'm also just fairly cynical of the Monster Slayer subclass for the Ranger as representative of a truly professional monster hunter. It doesn't feel like they're an expert in their field, and it's kind of mixed up a little too much in the other Ranger class abilities that just make it feel like a slightly specialized Ranger. I feel like the monster hunter needs a class of its own. Secondly, I've been in combat situations as a player before where I'm getting frustrated trying to figure out what exactly the monster is that I'm fighting and how on earth can I hurt it. When I say frustrated, I also don't mean like upset at the GM. I just mean I wish I had some sort of ability that could help me here because I'm meant to be an expert in hurting monsters. Hunter's Instincts is best used early in combat to gain some information on the monster you're fighting that can aid either yourself or your fellow party members to learn what damage types a monster is resistant to, and then inform the spellcasters not to hit the monster with lightning or fire damage. It can also be used to gauge a monster's exact armor class, so the barbarian can choose whether to recklessly attack or not, or a wizard can decide if it's worth putting their familiar in danger to use the help action. You can also learn a creature's type, perhaps spotting a vampire in the crowd, or realizing that the shambling corpse-like creatures you're fighting are actually fiends and not undead. It's an ability that's relevant to both social and combat encounters, allowing your expertise to aid you while socializing with a monster, but also aid you in combat so it doesn't feel like suddenly your expertise is only useful during the exploration tier of the game. Hunter's Instincts also extends to all creatures. You don't just use it against the creatures written about in your monster grimoire. We didn't want the monster hunter to feel too situational or specialized like the ranger can sometimes feel with their favored enemy and favored terrain. We wanted the monster hunter to still be useful in most, if not all, situations. But of course, your monster grimoire still buffs this ability for the monsters in which you are an expert in hunting. And that's the basic concept of the first 2 levels of the Grim Hollow Monster Hunter class. Once again, if you want to check it out for yourself, there's a link to the description below, which includes levels all the way up to 14 at time of recording. Let us know how it plays for you. Does it make you feel like a skilled and professional slayer of beasts, which is what we were aiming for? And of course, feel free to ask any questions you might have about it in the comments. You can also check out this video if you want to learn how to make liches, formidable opponents for the monster hunters in your D&D party to go and hunt down, or check out this video about the Grim Hollow transformations if you want to feature a monster hunter or play a monster hunter in your campaign who has a dark and terrible secret.